This is not a show, it is a movement.
Women are 50% of this population, and we all need to engage in this conversation rather than having half of the population feeling disengaged and left behind when it comes to talking about money.
There is something about financial confidence and confidence to speak up. You have to ask the question, even though you think the answer might be no, because it might very well be yes. We all know that closed mouths don't get fed. So
meet Josephina Smith, future-focused strategist and workplace innovator. She transforms outdated HR into modern, high-impact systems that energize teams, drive growth, and take businesses to new heights.
women are just not saving enough.
Yeah.
It's not just about putting the ladder down, it's also about helping them climb it. How are you making sure that this person is taking that action and being held accountable?
What do you think the issues are here? Is it just literally the fact that we haven't talked about money, or is it deeper than that?
It's definitely deeper than that, and there's a historical context. When did?
Are you stuck in your 9 to 5, worried that your salary, pension, or savings might never give you the freedom you crave? Well, imagine waking up knowing you control when you work, how you work, and when you retire. Today's episode of A Wealthy Life is a must-watch. I'm joined by Josephina Smith, the Director of Rewards at British Airways, and she's going to share her insights on how financial clarity, conscious money decisions, and even smart investment choices, in particular in property, can empower anyone to take control of their financial future. In this conversation, we're going to explore why so many people remain financially disengaged and how reactive spending, poor financial planning, is silently eating away at your future. And why, of course, now is the perfect time to rethink that traditional path to retirement. Whether you're dreaming of living your corporate job or creating a passive income or simply gaining more choice over when and how you work, this discussion is going to open your eyes to the strategies that can set you free. If you've ever wondered how to turn your savings and investments into real financial control, not to work on your terms, you'll want to stay till the end. And of course, what I really want to do in today's podcast is ask that question: what happens when we start conversations about money, investing, and we start to explore our finances more? Can women in particular move from financial disengagement to clarity and financial autonomy? And if you're a man, don't you dare hang up, because you'll have had a mother, you might have a sister, you might have female cousins, you might have a girlfriend or a wife. And we need to recognize that women are 50% of the population, but have 40% less pensions when they retire. So we all need to be engaging in this conversation around women will speak about money more. Rather than having half the population feeling disengaged and left behind, we all need to talk about money, which is very un-British of us, but we can do it. My name's Vicki Wusche. This is A Wealthy Life, and welcome, Josephina.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I'm really happy and pleased to be here talking about one of my favorite topics. And I have to admit, I haven't done as much as I would like in this space. So it's great on your podcast, just, seeing what we can do and what we can move forward.
Yeah, little sparks, little pebbles, little ripples, and let's see where it goes. So just to explain, Josephina and I met when we were at a NatWest Cushion event run by Better With Money, which was for International Women's Day back in March. And I met amazing women. We were having a conversation about this whole pay gap stuff. But before we get into that detail, I had to have a little play with ChatGPT, which is like my new favorite toy. I know there's lots of things. So can I just read to you what Chat said about you? I said, Josephina Smith is the Director of Rewards at British Airways. What can you tell me about her? And Chat said that Josephina exemplifies what it means to blend impact-driven reward leadership. You might have to explain what that means to us afterwards. With a commitment to women's financial resilience by ensuring fair pay, supporting working parents, and leveraging digital transformation. She stands as an advocate for closing wage and pension gaps. Excellent. And aligns perfectly with my mission of empowering women through property mindset and financial autonomy. So that sounds pretty good.
It does. I couldn't have done a better job myself.
It's quite clever, actually, when you ask it about you. The things that comes back, you go, oh, yeah, I forgot that I did that, because it goes off and squirrels away. What is Director of Rewards? Is that like old-fashioned, you're in charge of pay?
partly, that reward has morphed into something a bit bigger than just pay. So reward is meant to help employees experience the way that their employees want to reward them, which includes pay and their benefits, but also just from a paternal perspective, some of the benefits that we give our employees are meant to help them in the future and in the present. And that kind of helps them keep their mind on work. But apart from that, some of those benefits they're unable to access, or it would be very expensive to access on an individual basis. So we take advantage of the fact that we've got lots of people and therefore can negotiate really great rates. So that's partly one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is around the demographic itself within the business, and how can we support each demographic to enable them to keep their mind at work, not go absent, give them the right support. Because as you know, we're all individuals and we're all human beings with sometimes quite a lot of personal issues and baggage we carry around with us. Some of it is even around the health issues, mental health, stress. What can we offer our employees that would help them to keep them healthy and in work? And not just in work, but thriving.
I think that's great. I mean, for years, I remember doing, and I think you probably run these, one of those, but employers put on lunchtime or breakfast training for people around set topics, and they have speakers come in and they might talk about pensions and money. So obviously I would show up on the money and the property side of things, but it could also be about healthy eating or exercise or any of that sort of stuff. So I've always thought that one of the biggest stressors that anybody faces is financial. That if you don't get that bottom level of money sorted out, that you're not comfortable that you're earning enough to cover your expenses, which so many people don't even check. When you've got that level sorted, everything else becomes easier. Then you can get into more complex things, but that's just one level. That unknowing your financial situation just eats away at the back, even if you're not conscious of it. So getting conscious on that, I think, is really key. And if that's the sort of stuff that you're doing, and you mentioned mental health, that's so important for people. Never taught at school, never really talked about because we're British and it's too polite, all that nonsense. And yet, as you say, from an employer perspective, you might have employees who are stressed at work simply because they haven't done the adding up. I'm playing it down, but it is as simple as that in some cases.
Yes, it definitely is. And that also then impacts their physical well-being and other areas of well-being. So it could be a catalyst also for something else. And there is something about that reactive money that we spend. So, a coach of mine, which is really great, called Paula, she wrote a book about. In that book, she talked about reactive investment and proactive investment. So if you don't proactively invest in all of those things that matter to your employees, which includes benefits that support them, you get the reactive spend out of absenteeism,
yes,
and presenteeism and all of this stuff. And, we all know what that amounts to in terms of productivity, the whole of the UK from an absenteeism perspective. So that's a really important part. The other part from a reward perspective, going back to that introduction, is around driving the right behaviors. So in this case, that would be behaviors around finance. Not just behaviors that are expected from leadership, but it also has that cycle of, as a leader, how do I also take care of my people's well-being, including finance? How do I drive the right leadership behaviors? How do I drive the right managerial behaviors? How do I drive the right individual behaviors? And if you're looking at it holistically, that will involve finance in some way.
I mean, without being rude, it is one of the main reasons why most people go to work is to earn money. Yes, there is the daily structure. Yes, hopefully there is the enjoyment, the challenge, the knowledge, and all of that other stuff. But let's be honest, if you offered all that other stuff and you didn't pay people, they probably wouldn't go. Definitely wouldn't.
This is the thing, right? So it is quite an important function, and in a big business like BA, it does have quite a lot of impact. And the fact that it impacts people's lifestyle makes it very emotive. So all the decisions that we make have to be in the interest of the company as well as in the interest of our colleagues. So there has to be the right balance. That's very important for us.
And I think that's where I'm hearing the leadershipness of it, the language they're using. I mean, I remember, when I had jobs, I'd just go to work. I mean, I've worked for some quite nice companies like Marks and Spencer's, and we were all colleagues and everything. But basically, they just paid us and they expected us to do a job. And yes, we got some perks, like vouchers and things like that. Nowhere, certainly back a million years ago when I was working in these companies, it was never about checking on my financial well-being. And we know from the facts that are out there, we've got families that can't afford to feed themselves. How do they then concentrate at work? We know that I went to another talk at NatWest, and Guy Opperman, the former pensions minister, was there, and he shared the fact that there are 11 million people in the UK that do not even have £100 of savings. So if the washing machine broke down, they're stuffed. If the car breaks down, if they've got a car, they're stuffed. There's no safety net there at all, which is extraordinary. And we've got so many people who simply don't understand debt, that they can have credit cards with accruing interest, and they just don't understand how to get out of these cycles. And that has to mess with your mind, doesn't it?
I completely agree. So for us, what we try to do is not just talk about the well-being, we talk about empowering. And I think the language is really important. It's about empowering people to do something about their finances, be it build awareness and actually take some practical action and seek the right help. And to your point earlier on, you talked about people being a little bit shy, shall we say, and money being a taboo topic, but it's never been more important for people to talk about money. And I think that is the reason why we've had some leaders sort of set some apps. I think you would have heard about Go Henry,
yes,
to tackle it from a very young age. And I think, bring it on, the more the better, that people understand that actually this is how to look at your finances. And the earlier you do it, the better, which is somehow easier, because when you look at the research, the 20s and 30s, their gender pay gap is actually a lot smaller than people over 40.
Yeah.
That in itself says something, right? In terms of, that demographic being not comfortable talking about money. And we have to get people talking about it so they can receive the right help.
Definitely our grandparents wouldn't have been talking about it, and therefore those in their 40s plus would have been influenced by grandparents' beliefs around money. And actually, if you're then a child, a young person in your 20s, 30s, your parents have come through, and maybe there's less of great grandparents' influence in there, so that you're more open to this. You mentioned the gender pay gap there. So what do you believe, experience is really holding women back? You talked about how the gap being bigger for people post 40s than sub 40s. What do you think the issues are here? Is it just literally the fact that we haven't talked about money? So maybe it's a financial education thing. That's easy. Let's just go in and teach the 40-year-olds. Or is it deeper than that?
It's definitely deeper than that. And there's a historical context. So I love that you brought in history. So if you really think about it, when were women allowed to actually get a mortgage? This is 1975. When were they allowed to open bank accounts? So we are really behind the curve as women from a historical perspective. And then there's the systemic piece around how we pay women and the occupational segregation piece around being those who care for the family historically, and therefore do part-time jobs that are perhaps not paid as much. And therefore there's a shortfall in, what we pay them. And basically there's the right in your face point around men are better negotiators. They've been out there in the workplace. So just by virtue of being men, sometimes they get paid more than women for the same job. And that's where we get the unequal inequality around men and women's pay. So if you look at the pensions gap, which I'm also very passionate about, to be honest. So I'm passionate about any gap that has to do with women. There's a 48% gap, and there's a reason why. So women are just not saving enough.
Yeah. And some of that not saving is if you're not earning, it's not easy to then save.
So to say that, but the issue is if you're not earning, so that is the root cause. You just don't have the money, right? So the gender pay gap has been very good in raising an awareness of that issue, but to the extent that it's tackling it, is probably needs a lot more work. And I think there was a report that just came out, I think, from the National Pensions Commission around pensions and how women are saving for their retirement. And actually, there's a big shortfall they need to address.
Because the thing is, you can't guarantee in this day and age. If we go back to our grandparents tended to stay together, whether they were happy or not. They might just sit in different rooms and get on with it, but they didn't really tend to get divorced as much as it happened through more recent generations. And so there was still the two incomes coming in. But if you're then of a family that separates, and if you separate from your partners later in life, so the kids have fled and there's just you, and you end up as a single woman, in your 60s, you are then reliant on you. And I've spoken to women like this, and yes, they've got pensions. Yes, they are working for good companies. I mean, I've spoken to plenty of women in sort of corporate fields, and they've got nice company pensions coming in. So they've got maybe, let's call it 1,000 from the government, and then they might have another 1,000 or even 1,500 projected to come in from their corporate pension. But 2.5 grand isn't a lot if you are then a single person and you've got to provide for your own accommodation, your own food, your own travel. And let's be honest, if you do ever get to retire, let's say 67 at the moment, then you've got the potential of a full 20 years in quite probably a very active body, physical body and physical mind, to go off and enjoy yourself. But at 2.5 grand, by the time you've paid for your accommodation, even if you've cleared your mortgage, you've still got council taxes, utility bills, heating, clothing, insurance, everything. There is so much money that is required to support yourself. How do you get to live that life? The whole title of this podcast, A Wealthy Life. How do you get that if you don't start addressing it? And I suppose the question is here, but where do you feel that women are struggling? Let's say struggling. They're good at their jobs. They deserve to be paid well, but they struggle to advocate for themselves. I listened to the story of, I was talking to a young woman yesterday, and she was talking about a friend who moved house but kept the job where the job was. So she now has to travel further. When the manager in this shop is out, she steps up and is invited, isn't she lucky, invited to play the manager role, but for her own wage. She doesn't get extra money for being the manager or the deputy manager or whatever you want to call it, stepping up for a week while the manager's on holiday. She doesn't get the money for then driving in on those days that she wouldn't normally work. And she doesn't want to ask because she doesn't want to rock the boat.
Therein lies the problem when I talked about women not being able to negotiate. So there is something about financial confidence and confidence to speak up. So there are a number of things here. So there's the general having the confidence to speak up in a situation that you should speak up. And we all know that closed mouths don't get fed. So you have to ask the question, even though you think the answer might be no, because it might very well be yes. Yeah. And they might be relying on the fact that, well, you haven't asked me. Yes. Sometimes it's just about asking. And I'm not saying, it's always as simplistic as that. Sometimes it isn't. But please, it is better to ask than not to.
Or can think of examples of this. But so is it just women don't ask? So that's the first thing. Then why don't women ask? Is it confidence? Is it negotiation skills? Is that actually a skill that a woman doesn't have? Because I'm a mother. I spent my entire life negotiating with children. And I'm also in a relationship. I spend my entire time renegotiating with my husband about, well, I was going to say, what do we watch on the telly? But no, there's never any negotiation over that. It's always what I want to watch, really.
People are different and they approach things differently. And sometimes, just you talked about rocking the boat, right? Even though they may want to negotiate with their children, they're probably thinking, oh, I've got a lot to lose if I rock the boat at work. So that to me is a confidence thing.
But not something that a man would think. What? So a man might then think, well, hold on a second, you're asking me to step up as manager. I'm going to ask for the money. Why are they not scared of rocking the boat?
They have a lot more confidence when it comes to asking for these things. And because they've been traditionally seen as the breadwinner.
Yeah.
So it's not just about them asking, it's also about those that are responding to them.
Yes. And if you're and we nearly always are, in a male dominated environment, you've got a male asking a male, they would automatically imagine themselves talking peer to peer, whereas a woman might be, some of the conversations I've had with women managers or leaders awful at keeping the women down. And I spoke to one young girl and I said, so what happened? You've got a woman manager. And she said, oh, I asked her, and she turned around and she said, yeah, but I didn't get that when I was coming up through the business, and I'm fine. And it was just like, I could not believe that this woman would say it to somebody else.
Other topic, Vicky, that I'm also really sometimes appalled at, as well as really thinking this is a space that needs to change. Women supporting women.
Yeah.
It is really a funder. And I think when we talked about NatWest, I think I also mentioned that around women supporting women. It is there has never been a time that it is more needed. And it's sad to see that a lot of women tend to, want to give an excuse because I didn't have it. But actually, that's not the point. For me, it's about empowering the next generation. You've had your time. You can still improve. Nobody's time is up as long as you've got breath in your lungs, right?
Yeah.
You can still do something. You can still be impactful. So why then block another individual from actually realizing what they need to do to move forward financially? So there are many facets to this. It's not just about, the empowering piece. It's also about the mindset. It's about the leader. You can see how many different dimensions we've already touched upon that come to the equation. And we've got to have financial empowerment solutions that address all of these pieces.
Yeah. So to slightly put you on the spot then, if we're talking about we need to empower women and maybe negotiation skills, is this the sort of stuff that corporates, not just BA, but from your experience, because you must talk to you'll speak to other people up at your level in other corporates, is this the sort of things that corporates are doing? I mean, are businesses empowering their women to be better negotiators, better money managers?
I think the financial empowerment is kind of geared at all, so that it's more inclusive rather than exclusive to women. But that doesn't mean that we cannot carve a space out to address specific female issues around dealing with money. So I think more needs to be done. And I also think that practical help is really important. And how do you get that practical help? And actually, how do you get to a model where you can refer people to a financial coach, somebody that is in the know, not just the cosmetic type of financial coach? But I guess it's also thinking about some of the risks around that, because the employer doesn't want to get into that territory of I'm giving you financial advice.
Yeah, absolutely.
That has always been a little bit of a barrier to us providing some of that really needed financial coaching, because it's going into the nitty-gritty around people's finances and may include certain advice. And I think that bit for me is kind of what we then need to start to address. So how can we address that real practical piece? There's something about empowering, but also, you can empower somebody to death, but
yeah, you need the next step, don't you?
You need the next step. How are you making sure that this person is taking that action and being held accountable? So for women, it almost needs that, how do I, hold your hand initially to get that momentum, and then you can then start
standing on your own. No,
not all of us have that start. And I think a lot of women that I talk to be like, well, how do I start? I don't know where to begin. That is usually what they say. It's all very well you providing me with this information. I don't even know what it means.
Yes.
I need somebody to sit with me. So when you've got a generic program that just addresses all of the generic pieces, people get lost in it and then just get the value. But it's also a balance around how can you get that detailed piece? Maybe that's more for people who are passionate like us to try and support the corporate system.
To bring in the individual within the corporate world to a point where they're getting the education and the support that they needed. And as you say, you're making it inclusive rather than exclusive to women, but making your programs or designing your rewards, it helps to have that little thought of, hang on a second, but a woman will experience this differently. Would this still work for her? Because it's all well and good saying, right, okay, I'm going to give you a talk about the next time pay rounds, not that I think you ever would, but next time we get round to pay rises, this is what you need to be saying. But that still just wouldn't work for the women there. we also touched a little while ago on the different generations. So I know from speaking to women of different ages, there is and I can't work out whether someone's a Gen Z or a millennial, but the younger ones, the sort of the mid 20s to mid 30s bunch, that a lot of those women are very much more aware. So they're more conscious of the fact that they need to be on top of their finances. Some of them are making decisions that they want to have independent financial wealth, regardless of whether they end up finding a partner or not finding a partner. They're not looking for a partner in order to give them the financial security. They want to be financially secure in their own. And then we've got, as we mentioned, the older age groups of different age groups. So like your 40s, your 50s and your 60s, who are experiencing money in a different way. Do you think that we can get to this younger group of women and get them to, I don't know, it's almost, like when you meet someone, what you really want to do is dissect their brain in a non-gory way, but through conversation and going, so what do you think about that? And how did you decide? I don't think that about that. Why did you decide to think about that? What did you see? What did you learn that I didn't see, that I didn't learn?
So you were talking about like a money reverse mentoring type thing.
Yeah.
I think that would be brilliant because, I have met some really fascinating, progressive, brilliant young minds that you think, oh my God, how did you know all of this? How did you get to, and they're doing so well. There's so many young millionaires out there that are outside of the corporate structure. And you've got to think, I've got an entrepreneurial streak in this. I'm always thinking, how did you do that? What did you do? What was the catalyst?
Yes.
It will so benefit older women to kind of harness some of that, tap into some of that. They would be willing to share because they share everything, right? They share, this is what I did. And that's why probably in their own sort of generation, there is that, how would you say, sense of, I want to be financially independent.
And I would say it's not only the young ones, because I was literally speaking to a woman in last month's podcast, and she told a story, Ann Taylor, of her dad at something like the age of 16, 17, 18, very young, made her sit down and make a list of all the money, all the things that she needed to spend money on. And she said that it's been really good for her in that she's more financially aware, but it has made the side effect of doing it for her is she's then been very money holdy-on-y. None of that singing those words, but she's really,
when you say hold on, I'm just going to open the door slightly. So
hold on, as in, she's not mean, she's not greedy,
overly
she's not
controlled.
Yeah. So yes, very controlling, not open to spending at all. And then there is a blend there because you can have your spreadsheet. I mean, I'm a huge control freak. I've got my control freak, but I love to spend, but I spend consciously. Whereas she was in control of her money, but was holding on, in a sense, a little too tight and not fond of the spending side. And there's a blend for everybody, and it's like a pendulum, isn't it? But yes, I just feel like there's a real something there that we could just diagnose or dissect younger people and get them their ideas out. So on that basis then, and I know you're only a smidge over 30 yourself, obviously, as am I. So if you were to pop back last year and just tell your 30-year-old self, what would you whisper to your younger self about some of your financial or career insights that would help you this year, now that you're 31, do things better or easier? Or
starters, how many things are out there that can support me in understanding finances better?
So you mean what resources are out there? Things like podcast books?
That's right. What resources are, but also what financial instruments are around.
Okay.
Because I find that women have heard about investments, but don't know where to start. They read a book. The book is not really giving them that practical insight. So how many instruments have you got? What savings, high interest savings? You can imagine that a lot of women have their savings in very low interest savings. They just keep it there. They just don't know. No. So from a financial point of view, what instrument should I be thinking about? Okay, you talked about investing in property. Well, where can they get that practical help? Who can show them the way? It's not just about, putting the ladder down. It's also about helping them climb it, right?
Yes.
well, this is your next step. This is, even if, it's just two people you choose out of the whole lot who are really willing, because, there's something about you bringing the knowledge, but somebody else has to bring the determination as well.
Yes.
And also have the mindset and the discipline. So there's other things that the individual needs to bring to the table. But those who have got that, what is their next step to be really shown? Because I thought that was missing for me.
Yes. The
Because I
being
was
shown
a lot earlier. Investments, this is what you do, this is how you invest in the market, this is how you look at different companies, this is the process, this is how you set up an investment account, this is who you need to talk to about your retirement income.
Like a step by step.
Exactly.
I think there's also something there, isn't there, about language, because I'm quite sure that if we were to pull up a couple of men onto the podcast and ask them, and they go, oh yeah, well, I just did da 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 da, or I watched yakety yakety, and I've got a friend who teaches people how to trade on the market, and he does have men and women there. It's just easy for him to talk about this stuff, whereas I'm really good with my maths, and I love a spreadsheet, and I love my property, but I look at him and I go, oh yeah, there's something that doesn't quite click with the language that he's using that excites me enough that I want to pay attention to that side of stuff. And I wonder if there's a whole sort of language barrier here, because the language of investment is very male, and they use words that are just not necessary. So what you mean is buying a share in a company, so just EFTs. I mean, so a group of shares, then it is part of the process, isn't it? That if you're on the in, that you want to put those barriers so that people have to work a bit harder to get into your club. Whereas, I'm not a communist. I don't want to take everybody's money and share it out, because quite frankly, as you said, there is a bit about, you've got to have the skills to manage the money. I'm probably going to lose 1 million. If I had 1 million followers, I'd lose 1 million followers here, but you're going to have people who know how, you're going to have people who want to know how and are willing to put the efforts in. But equally, there are people out there that are quite happy to sit back and do nothing, but will sit with their hands out and go, well, go on then, just give it to me because I deserve it. So that's why I'm not into all this, let's share it all out equally. I think you work for it. But I think if you're going to work for it, and you want to learn, you want to know more, you're inquisitive, you use the word determined, or maybe you're not focused yet, but anything, you've got all of that, then we should have a way that we can make this easier for everybody to access. I mean, I'm just applied for a TED talk called Responsibility Enough and Contribution, and I didn't get accepted because I talked about football fit players. And what I was saying was, we live in a world where our doctors and nurses aren't valued financially, just as an example. Our teachers aren't, the armed forces, the policemen, the firemen, everybody that saves our lives, everybody that brings up our children, and everybody that keeps us alive, we don't value. And yet a young bloke can kick a spherical thing around a rectangle at the weekend and earn millions. And unfortunately, the two guys I was speaking to were football fans, and all they quizzed me on, and they had all the answers about why they missed the point completely, why the footballer should earn as much money as he does, the skill, and it's not just that 1 hour or however 90 minutes on a Saturday, it's all the training that they put in, and this is why and I went, you completely missed the point of the conversation, which is the values. And I think that comes back to the word reward, isn't it? How we value ourselves, how we are valued in the workplace, and how we are rewarded back. So if you could, this is a mean question, wave a magic wand for, and we'll stick to women at the moment, one wish that you could give to women that would make life easier for them to feel more confident with their money.
I think you've got to develop the confidence, because if you don't develop the confidence, there's just no way to move forward.
Yeah, so I can give you all the education I like, but if you haven't got the confidence to act on it, it's pointless.
Unfortunately, that's one thing you can't get around.
But in order to feel confident, you do need some of the education.
That's right. Some of the empowerment.
Yes. And this is why you are Director of Rewards. Very good answer. Yes. Well, look, we could talk for hours, and I'm very conscious of the fact we could. So there may be another run of this.
Yes, because I don't think we scratched the surface.
Actually. No, I don't think we have.
Like a whole lot of notes and things that I actually really wanted to talk about.
Well, look, stick in a couple. I'm just conscious of the time. So Please, no, I'd love you to share something, because the whole point of this is I want to dissect brain. So I've asked the questions that I can think of, but if I haven't got the language to construct the question, to dig out a piece that you know, and I can't ask the question because I don't know it, tell me something. Share.
One of the things that I had spoken to another lady who I've worked with for quite a while, and she is now on the pension boards, one of our supplier consultants. So I spoke to her about, what if, we talk about the pensions gap, and this is specifically about pensions. So I like to have some of these harebrained ideas. That's why I got overly excited when you started talking about younger generation.
Yeah.
They're kind of my thing.
Yeah.
And when, for example, when women are on maternity leave and they're not earning, why can't their partners who are working pay into their pension on their behalf?
I don't know.
This is it, right?
Yeah. I mean, my daughter is literally, we've got a brand new grandson, and I was just saying to her, so how's this going to work? And she's got a couple of months of full pay, and then she's got a couple of months of, I think it's 75% pay. And then she just goes on to, she wants to take a year off at the tail end. She's got 2 or 3 months where she's going to earn no money at all.
Well, this is my point.
Yeah. But if you then think of people as a unit, so there are 2 partners with, let's just say, the 1 child for a minute. One's now going to gradually over the 12 months get reduced earnings. As the earnings are full earnings, that's great, their pension is being covered. But as the earnings start to reduce, I don't know if their pension is then only 75% of the pension, or they still paying 100%, but that sort of goes down this side. So then this partner, the one that is still working, whoever that is, has then got to provide for the entire family, because there is now an actual income gap in the household. Have them have enough money that not only can they then be the person who provides to, and we talked about this as the male being the financial provider, but also then enable them that they can then pay into the pension as well, top up the pension.
In reality, what tends to happen is that, men are kind of really savvy. So they might cut back on something else to do the minimum. And I guess the obligation from an employer point of view, which you would have is, sometimes it's like a matching scheme where you put in a certain amount of money, and so if you pay enough to maintain the employers, is even a better deal. We as employers have to commit to saying, even though you make the minimum when you're on maternity leave, for example, maybe, it was like 4. If you put 4 in, I put 5 in, but actually the minimum from auto enrollment is 2%. You to put the 2%, I'll still put the 5% in. So that kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
British Airways, we really support our ladies that go off, or colleagues that go off on maternity leave, in the sense that they earn their full bonus when they come back. They earn a full salary, and they can work 4 days a week to earn that. We don't reduce the salary. So from that perspective, it's a really big game changer and support from an inclusive perspective, and really supports. So those kind of things, or those kind of interventions, putting those kind of things in place, will take a little bit of thinking, but I don't think it's impossible.
It's not rocket science.
It's not.
It's a willing, isn't it?
Shared parental and
Yeah.
make it work. Why can't you do shared pension payments?
Yes. It's
So just
interesting, isn't it?
thinking through some of the things that are there, some of those opportunities that are there to capitalize on, with just a little bit of thinking through and managing of risks, that we could really bring to life to help women along that journey from a retirement perspective.
I think this is where the conversation needs to happen, doesn't it? Because my feeling is, and I haven't worked in politics, but so often when a topic comes up in the politics, they're already jumping to the fact, oh no, that's going to cost too much money. And it's all we hear in the media at the moment is Rayner. Is Angela Rayner? Is that the one I mean? Who's the chancellor?
Yeah, her.
Her as like painted herself into a corner because she's not going to break her fiscal rules and all this sort of stuff. So the answer is no to everything. And slightly off topic, I was listening to Fergal Sharkey in a conversation last month about water, and he was talking about how no, it isn't going to cost the government £100 billion to buy the water companies, because the water companies are essentially bankrupt. And I know I'm relaying something that's off topic, but he's thought it through differently. He's gone to the financial institutions and they've agreed to fund him. But, I mean, obviously he's not the government, so he was doing it hypothetically, but there are people who are willing to invest, and we don't have to say no, it's going to cost too much before we've brainstormed the ideas and then work out, okay, it is going to cost money. How can we make that money? It doesn't all have to come from the government or the employer or the human. It can be almost like a public-private personal partnership
Partnership, yes.
of how
Yeah.
to fill this gap, because women are going to live longer than their partners.
Right.
They are always going to earn less, nearly always going to earn less than their partners, and they're always going to have this chasing this pension
Yeah.
pay gap. And it just equality, but not saying just because there's you and me and we're both women, we should get what the men would get. If we are valued and what we contribute is the same, why aren't we getting the
Let's
same?
balance the scales.
Yeah. And you mentioned that a lot of women will take part-time jobs, but if they're doing a part-time job that is the same level of a full-time man, their hourly rate won't be the full-time rate. They will still do the same work, but because they do it 4 days a week or 3 days a week because of childcare, then they'll earn less. That's the bit that's not fair.
Sometimes is the reality for a lot of people. Even though they say they're working part-time, actually they're working more full-time hours, but getting paid part-time.
We will have to draw this to a close and save your notes. Let's have another conversation. And I definitely would like to get our group together again and build on this offline. So that very much needs to happen. Josephina, I'm so great. I know how busy your diary is, and I am so grateful that you've managed to squeeze me in between all the important stuff that you're doing at BA for all your colleagues, men and women.
Thank you so much for having me. I have really enjoyed this conversation. You could see me like closing doors, waving my hands. So, yeah, for me, anything that's going to make an impact on some of these passion-filled topics for me, and we will really move the dial in an area that is really important, is something I will always have time for.
Excellent. Thank you. And so, unlike my own guest, you're not offering free calls and a free ebook because obviously you're sat very firmly in a corporate base. But I'm going to share, if it's okay with you, your LinkedIn connections, because I know that you post stuff on there. And if listeners are interested in what you have to say, then LinkedIn would be a great way to connect with you and hear more about what you're saying. But also, listeners, if you're out there, if any of you have got anything to contribute to this debate, we would love to hear from you, because we want to take this conversation up. If you are one of those young people whose brains we can dissect as to what it is you think about money and why you think the way you think, so that we can all start to understand, okay, so I can see how the thoughts link together and now can start to, that would be amazing. Please get in touch. I just want to finish off because I value my listeners' time, and I always want to make sure that they leave with 3 insights. So because I know that I'm going to do this, if I do 2 and you could be thinking of 1 as well, then it would be great to have an insight from you. So if I start off, because this leaves them with a little bit more whoosh in their life, so a clever play on their names there. So I'm going to go with financial confidence. That financial confidence is I'm going to say complex mix, because I do think it is a little complex mix of financial education and practical skills that equal financial confidence. But financial confidence can then be the gearbox that drives so much other stuff, your personal stress levels, your personal financial worth, if you like, how you're doing financially, and also career. So I think that financial confidence, which is not just so simple that we can just snap, easy say it, but it is something that we really need to work on. And then on that theme, that you don't really need to be a financial expert in order to build your wealth. What you need is awareness, which obviously if you're listening to this, hopefully you've got that awareness, some sort of intention, goal, purpose. But also we talked about this willingness to start, that you actually are prepared to do something about it. And if you are, then you know that I've got the whole Wealthy Life community, where I have filled as many of the products, the books and everything that I make is all in there. You know that you've got the 4-hour YouTube. So I'm doing as much as I can to start you on that journey, but you have to have the awareness and then have the willingness to act. So, Josephina, a whoosh from you.
My insight is just telling people, to get financially savvy. This is not a show, it is a movement.
All right. So look, let me just finish off now and say that to you, the listener, if Josephina's insights have lit a fire in you, you know that now is the time to act. So whether you're navigating a move at work, whether you're coming up to pay negotiations, you know how important that is. Maybe you are one of those women in your 40s or 50s and you're planning for your midlife wealth. You know how important that is. Or maybe you just want to feel a bit more confident about money. We are here to help. I've already mentioned there are links to the tools, the resources and the courses and everything else. The Smart Woman's Ultimate Guide to Money and Investing. All of those links are in the show notes. I've given you everything I possibly can. And I hope that Josephina and I have given you that little bit of whoosh to get you going, because you deserve a wealthy life, not just in terms of money, but in terms of meaning and security, freedom and a peace of mind. And I hope that we can make that happen for you.
Well said, Vicki.
Josephina, thank you very much. I love the fact that this is not just a show, it's a movement. And we are going to make that happen, I am sure. Thank you again so much for your time. I'm very, very grateful.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So bye-bye, everybody. And goodbye, Josephina. We'll speak again soon.
Okay. Bye.